Have a seat. So I'm going to turn you over to Che Maple, and she is an alum of Leadership Essentials and a great resource for us, and also coaches with us. So I'll let her tell you more about, and I think you're going to be with her for about 45 minutes.
Welcome, and hello. Lori is correct. I graduated from Leadership Essentials in 2015, and it was life-changing for me, so much so that everything in my life changed in terms of just my career in itself. So hopefully, and I'm going to assume that you're all going to have the same experience, and the biggest thing that I learned was never to be afraid to bet on myself. So if you don't take anything else away from all the amazing things that you've ever done, you are learning the skills and the tools that you need to be successful in any and everything that you're ever going to do and ever accomplish moving forward. So now you have your benchmark. All right, so we're going to talk about transforming leadership, transformational leadership, what it means to be a transformational leader, all of these words that we're using in today's marketplace and workplace. But let me just get an idea of how many of you are leaders? Okay, trick question. Everyone should raise their hand. Who are leaders? Who are frontline managers? Okay, who are leaders of just projects? Okay, any executives? Executive, okay. CEOs? Okay, so pretty much by definition, we're all leaders, either people of projects or we are in the executive rank. Very good, very good. Quick question, does anyone have a definition of what they think transformational leadership is? That's willing to share? Okay.
Just being fluid to adapt to the team or the goal you're trying to reach.
Yes, that's. I think one of the biggest things that we've learned over the 2 years is that being adaptable, flexible, and just being able to focus in the crisis has really transformed a lot of ways in terms of how we are leading or how you see organizations are behaving. And if anything else, it is such a great foundation to tear down old beliefs and to embark on new ones. And what we're going to talk about today, even though what we're talking about is transformational leadership, but the focus of this presentation is really looking at what has actually changed in your workplace, how are you as a leader impacting your employees or people that work for you, or if you are an employee and you are working for someone, how has the change in terms of your leaders, how has that impacted you as well? Can you guys see? Are you okay? Okay. All right, so who am I? My name is all of this, but my name is Uche Anye Maple. I go by Uche for short. I recently retired last year after 22 years in the workplace, and I started my own company, which is a leadership and business training company. I go in and help leaders in the workplace to help them reduce the amount of people leaving the company and increase employee engagement, because that's what is happening a lot right now. And in terms of just the business side, because of what has happened in the last 2 years, I think it is very important that anyone who's working in the workplace use your talents and natural gifts to always create another stream of income. So I help entrepreneurs do that. Graduated from Prairie View A&M University, HBCU. I'm a native Texan. Got my MBA from University of Phoenix and got my MS in Systems Engineering from Johns Hopkins, and also is a graduate of Leadership Essential. So just really excited to be here today. And I will say this, over the last 22 years of my experience, that I have not had a traditional career. I'm the Gen X. We're the ones that people used to get upset about because we wanted work-family balance, and we used to like to leave work early to go pick up our kids. So we were really resistant, and we're always, and I consider this that we're the forgotten generation. We hear a lot about baby boomers and everyone else, and Gen X we're forgotten about. So that is who I am in a nutshell. All right. So what is transformational leadership? James Burns, he authored a book called Transformational Leadership back in the 70s, and this is what he described it as, which is a leader who needs to have a solid understanding of the necessary skills to be successful and to be able to articulate and explain those goals and the method to which they are achieved. I think that is still prevalent today. Communication is one of the biggest things, and then having influence where people are able to see your vision and to follow it and to get buy-in so that you can be successful, not just with yourself, but with your business. Which brings me to this. Does anyone remember when Blockbuster was trying to buy Netflix, right? It was in 2000, right? You remember what happened? What happened? You don't have to raise your hand, just blurt it out. What
I
happened?
didn't think it was a good idea to buy it. I didn't think it was gonna be as longevity.
That is correct. Do you remember what Netflix started as?
DVDs.
That's correct, mail-in DVDs, that is correct. So they started as mail-in DVDs. In 2000, they gave Blockbuster an offer to buy them. They rejected, and 7 years later, something happened. Does anyone know?
Streaming.
That's right. Do you remember how they did it?
I don't, to be honest.
Through video consoles. If anyone remembers, and I can't remember the name of the consoles back then, but they were doing it through video consoles. And that was the way that they revolutionized and changed how people were receiving live streaming. That's a visionary leader, visionary organization. And they took the risk because no one bought them when they were losing clients, when they were losing customers, but they changed and revolutionized how people were going to able to receive their service. This is an example of being a trailblazer. And I want you guys to see this because you may be trailblazing and impacting the world in a way that no one believes in. But if you stay with it, you could be the next Netflix, right? Do you know how much they're worth now? $291
Not as much as
million.
last week.
Well, so what, right? We did buy stock, but so what, right? But they're worth that much now. So if we're talking about transformational leadership, it is to do things that no one is willing to do and to take the risk that no one else is willing to take. But in order to be a leader in your organization, it will call for that. And those are the ones who impact and make change, not only in their business, but in the world. So some of the things that talk about transformational leadership skills includes casting a vision and direction. I think over here you guys had talked about that when you were talking about what it means to be a visionary leader. Diversity of thought. Diversity of thought. We talked about D&I, right? The D&I will. But diversity of thought is more than just what race, gender, is really thinking holistically from a viewpoint in terms of what the changes that we're trying to make, how is that going to propel us and sustain us to what is next? Do you think that Netflix knew what was happening in the world when they said they were going to go to on-demand streaming? Right? Same thing with Amazon. They started out
Selling books.
selling books, and look at where they are today. So to be transformational, you have to disrupt. You have to be willing to disrupt the current state of something and not be afraid to do it. Develop people. We talk about this, what it means to develop people when you're being a transformational leader. It is to have influence, yes, but more importantly, it's to care about them. It is to care about them and themselves and where they want to be. Leading in a crisis. Can anyone tell me what their companies did during 2020? How did your company lead in whatever expertise your business is in? Do you remember? Go ahead.
I work in health information technology, so we supported the Maryland Department of Health with data and analytics for COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a lot of, I guess, trying to motivate a group of people around a common goal, because there was kind of a lot of hours and effort in supporting the state. So
Did anyone do anything as an individual that was transformational in 2020?
So my department allowed our whole entire company to be able to work mobile.
Very good. Anyone else?
Positivity.
Yep. So in 2020, the company I was working for, I was part of the enterprise D&I community. And right after George Floyd passed away, had died, that weekend, I was really sick, I didn't know what to do, and I remember calling someone who was a close friend of the president of the company. And he said, email the president, he'll know what to do, don't be afraid, he'll bring it up. Okay, Monday morning, one of the other members, part of my D&I team, emailed a letter that explicitly stated exactly how I felt, and she emailed it to the D&I team, the enterprise, where we have the CEO, director. She emailed it to them. But here's what's interesting. No one said anything. No one said anything. And in that moment, I could have done the same. But because of what I was feeling, I was more in an emotional state. But at that moment, I knew that my values in this time was not in alignment with being quiet and no one saying anything. So I replied back to her email and said, I second, and I feel the same way. And then immediately, it was an avalanche. But not without me going to talk to other people who didn't say anything. And here's what they said: nothing is going to change. This is not the first time. Maybe this instance is the first time, but I've been dealing with this since I've been at this company for 20 years. As a result of me only speaking up and saying, hey, I agree with her, we began to change a lot of things in the organization. They made mental health a sick leave. They began to roll out and made statements universally, because normally we don't say anything because we don't take sides. But as a result of that, 2 years later, just by backing someone up, taking the risk, not knowing I was doing transformational leadership, the company's now in a better place. There are going to be times where you're going to have to take a stand. Whatever that is, right? If you're working with people or people working for you, whatever that is, there's going to be a time where you're going to have to draw a line in the sand to be a transformational leader. And you may be the next Netflix, who knows, right, in your own way. But knowing when to do that, because when to lead in a crisis, you can't follow the norm, it's a crisis. How is your company going to sustain? How are you going to sustain as a person working in the company? How are the people working for you going to be able to sustain? And sometimes just following the norm doesn't work anymore. But as a result of being part of Leadership Essentials, that's the whole point of it, is to break the normalcy. Gives you an opportunity to reinvent the organization for the better. And here's the beauty, because we know that this is an ever-changing environment, you get to keep changing. Has anyone ever heard of a living document? Okay, it's the same thing. You reevaluate it based on what's happening now, because what happened in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s are not applicable to what we're going through now. So you get to change, and that's the point, is taking the risk and being transformative. And then, of course, making things happen. All right, so question I have, if anyone wants to answer, what skills are you using in today's marketplace based on this? Based on what you've learned in LE, because you guys have talked about that. What skills are you using now? Your leader, who's cast the vision? I know you've cast the vision in your teams. I know you have, right? A new vision, whether it's working remotely or how benefits, mental health, well-being. I know that you guys have cast the vision, or someone in your organization has cast the vision. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, at some time it depends on what the scenario is, but all of them are being employed because about making things happen, reinvent the organization. We're working in a virtual environment where you have some people who are in crisis. You have to develop them. You have to enter into the conversation where you really have to engage with emotional intelligence. What is best for them? And if we're talking about diversity, not everybody, like you said, is going according to just grades. It could be years of service where now all of a sudden they're working from home. What does that support look like? What do the resources look like? Just making sure you're taking in everything when you're developing your people, working with who they are, not where you just want them to be. So,
Anyone else? Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Mark, you're sitting in the front. Well, you had mentioned your I guess your former company had made a shift using sick leave for mental health, and our organization did a similar thing, and basically stated if you need not just formal time, but to take that time just for yourself and to recover. And actually, my group supervisor fairly early on emailed the whole group and said, I'm taking off Friday, I need this time. He set that example and said, I'm doing this for myself so you can feel free to do it for you. And
Love that.
that was huge, I think.
Yeah, love that, love that. Anyone else? Executive, I'm gonna ask you. I got to.
I mean, setting a vision for the organization itself, we didn't really have one. Just getting really clear on where our intentions are for the work that we're doing, like why are we all here, what's the purpose of this, and if we're saying it's for this one thing, then how is that being backed up? So we created core values as an organization, so we can continue to hold ourselves accountable to that. We created processes of accountability, so trainings that fell in line with those core values, and mandates around that.
That's great.
Yeah.
Are you at a startup?
So it's a nonprofit that started 2 years ago, but I got there 6 months ago.
Okay, ooh, that's amazing, in 6 months. Okay, all
I
right.
assure you, she's doing all of those things.
Anyone else? All right. All right, so pretty much, listen, this is supposed to be an engaging, this is not formal at all. What I do want to cover today is just the LEAP framework that I teach when I go in a corporate place in terms of how their leaders can move forward and push forward. And then we're going to have a case study where everyone's going to be able to answer questions, and then you'll present it in terms of what your thoughts are. Okay, so old mindset, and let me know if you have heard this, because I heard this when I started in the workplace in the early 2000s. Taking the assignments that they give you, even if you're overtasked. Anyone? Yeah. Okay. Talk about burnout and anxiety. And not even just that. You wonder why you don't get promoted is because you have extra work that has nothing to do with where you're going. Don't speak up for yourself, just nod yes until you're no longer the focus of conversation. Anyone? What is happening outside these walls has no impact into how you perform at work. Leave your personal business at the door. You are a robot. I used to preach this, I'm ashamed to say, because that's what I was taught until I became a frontline manager, and I was in a training, and the trainer said, this is a people company, not a technology company. If people aren't here, your company won't exist. So that changed how I began to manage and become a better leader, because I had a zero tolerance if people brought their personal into the workplace. So that was transformational for me. I no longer believe that anymore. Send an email late at night or on weekends to a period dedicated to your job. Yeah, okay. How many of us have done that? Guilty, okay, yep. No one? No one else? Wow. Okay. But you know what, it worked. Because they're like, oh my gosh, you're working late. Or it backfired on me. He was like, I didn't tell you to do that. Don't work late ever again. That's not the environment. And I was like, okay, I got it. All right, so new mindset. After talking to multiple leaders and at different companies, these are some of the things that they mentioned that the new mindset is. And let me be clear, this is not, the age range for this was between 30 and 55, not above that, okay? So, new mindset, successful organizations are embracing a more human-centric culture, and this is really post-COVID in terms of what they're thinking. A culture that accepts flexibility and overall employee well-being. I think right now it is very, very stressful to be a leader, especially a leader of people. Because not only are you looking at their performance, you're now like a therapist, you're now a coach, you're now doing a lot of things that you were not normally trained to do or paid to do, but that's a different conversation. But now you're taking on more of that now. And that, the question I always ask is, what is the company doing for leaders? Because as a leader of people, they typically have X amount of percentage of dollars that you're used to manage your people, right? And then everything else is technical. And now I'm hoping that that's shifting, because we were like trying to advocate for that. But those are one of the things is that, as a leader now, you're doing more than what you were probably hired to do pre-COVID. Employees now comfortable setting boundaries. They don't mind saying, listen, if you want me to do this, then this is gonna fall through. I can't do everything. And I think now people are more receptive of that versus what it was in the past. And you don't get docked when it comes time for performance reviews. Because now you've already set the expectations, you told your leaders what you can do, or the other way around. You as a leader have been informed of what the people that work for you that can do. So it's not a surprise. Employees are now more engaged with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Before it was just the D&I, now we have the equity in there. So that is something, how many of you, let me just ask, show of hands, that's on your D&I community at work? Okay, does your leader talk about D&I? Better yet, does your leader demonstrate DE&I? Okay, that's the best way to say it, very good, all right. Mental health is now part of sick leave. The new mindset, current events that impact your culture are now open up for discussion with your leadership. To me, that is one of the most newest things that have happened, because prior to that, a couple of years ago, who was that? That happened in Baltimore with the Freddie Gray. I was working at that time. And let me just tell you, if you had mentioned that at all, it was frowned upon. You had to come to work. If it affected you, you had to come to work with a brave face, smiling, still doing your work, doing your job every day. That has changed a lot. And I think it's one of the best things, because now people are, instead of people saying, when are you gonna get this done, they're now asking you, how you doing?
Yeah.
What's going on? And that is a pivotal shift. Again, you're a people organization. If people aren't there, you don't have one. So that is one of the best shifts, I believe, that has happened, where people are able to freely articulate how they feel and then go do amazing work. Because once you compartmentalize, it is difficult to have that. And then the new mindset too is being able to improve retention and employee engagement by being an empathetic leader. That's like the newest currency. Empathy is the newest form of currency. To be able to see someone and to understand by putting yourselves in their shoes. There was a saying is, treat people how you want to be treated. Now it's treat people how they want to be treated. And that's the way. And that's really what that really means. Okay, so I got this stats from Forbes last year, or this year. 4.3 million people voluntarily quit their jobs in 2021. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 44 million last year, which is insane. But people are quitting for a reason, right? People just don't quit. And McKinsey they conducted a survey of 600 participants, and they said the number one reason was for uncaring leaders. So even though the world is shifting, even though we're shifting, right, but there are still some who just, by default, just don't care. Now, they didn't say if that was a demographic, if that was an age thing, but this is just what they did based on the surveys. unsustainable expectation of work performance. When people quit, guilty. I still expect everyone to get the work done, plus take some. Doesn't work. We miss deadlines, and everyone is angry, and then they become cynics, and then they leave. And we need to stop that, right? The real thing is that if we can't get the work done, we need to be able to communicate that to our customer, that we need more time, or we have to be more aggressive in hiring. And doing things differently. Maybe you can't get someone with a degree. Maybe they can only have an associate's, or maybe they have experience, but that shift has to happen. The third thing is lack of career advancement. Is that still the case?
See you later.
Are people still feel like they can't get advanced in their careers? Yes. Anyone else? Yes. Anyone else? Yes. Anyone else? How many people, Laura, how many people are in here?
I think today 21.
It's only 3 people? That's interesting. That's not according to stats. Okay. Do you know is it because you've already left a company? Oh, okay.
I left the company.
Okay. Makes a lot more sense. And then overall anxiety, burnout, stress, and death in the family. So when we are not able as leaders, or I'm just gonna say as leaders, when we're not able as leaders to really understand what is happening to the people that work for us, it is detrimental to the success, not just for your team, but for the business as a whole. So we really want to make sure that we keep that in mind as we're having these discussions. What are some changes you have seen your organization done to improve retention and employee engagement?
My company?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing.
Okay. That's not good.
We own office space.
Okay.
We have lost a lot of people. We have had a huge kind of rollout. We're not just gonna give people more money, but we did spring bonuses. We are increasing everybody's salary mid-year this year. We've given a flex holiday, as well as, not grants. But there's been a whole list of stuff because we have realized that we're losing people and we need to show them that we appreciate them.
What was the core?
Sorry?
What was the core of people leaving?
It was burnout.
Mm.
Burnout or shifting industries. We are in the construction industry. We still have to work on weekends and at night and can't always, change that. So that's the other thing. We're compensating people who work on those off hours 20% more than what they're getting.
That's actually really good for construction. Construction is a beast.
Yeah.
So the fact that they're making those shifts, that's pretty good. Yes.
So I work at a hospital, and I think as everyone knows, we've had just mass exoduses of nurses, and it, like you said, when people leave, then kind of the work is redistributed among the people who remain, and then there's more burnout, and it's not great. But one of the things that I've seen our organization do is we recently, in the last year and a half, hired a new president, and his thing is he's very much a people leader, a people first leader. And so what we've seen is a lot of change in leadership that did not follow that mentality, which I think is fantastic, because we're slowly seeing culture change to about being about, you don't leave your personal life at home. Personal life does impact your professional life, and how do we talk about it? How do we kind of manage through that while getting the work done?
Yes. Okay. How many frontline managers do we have in here? So you do the hiring and firing? Frontline managers? Yes? Have people come to you to talk about why, and this is just, I'm trying to see if this is up here. Has the people come to you, people that work for you, expressed why they may be happy or why they're not happy? Yes? Okay. Because typically, statistically speaking, frontline managers, you're like at the ground, right? You're the one that make or break, attract or repel people that come to you. And what we found out is that at the leadership level, president level, they usually roll out amazing plans. And then it gets funneled. And by the time it gets to the frontline managers, it's not implemented. So I always say that frontline managers, you are the gatekeepers. If you can keep people happy, not even happy, satisfied with their contribution of work, you're gonna have a more engaged workforce. Any other questions? Does anyone else have anything else? Okay. All right, so as a result of retention, not good retention and engagement, I always recommend for leaders to adapt a new way of thinking, which is to lead, to have empathy, authority, and purpose. Right now, for leaders, we have to lead forward. I just do not believe, based on just all the statistics and just talking to leaders, in terms of just waiting for another crisis to happen. Like, we have to think about what's next. How can we increase employee engagement? And how can we as leaders not burn out? So what are some of the things from a leader stand, as leaders, what are some of the things that you're doing to reduce your burnout, anxiety, stress? What are some of the things that you have now incorporated into your lives?
Talking about it openly, recognizing when other people are starting to get burned out and pulling it out of them and forcing them to take a step back.
Okay, anyone else? What are you doing as a leader? So you guys haven't had burnout or stress and anxiety in the last 2 years? I know frontline managers, yeah.
As you say, I've made more of an effort to have kind of team building activities so that we have a chance to connect with people individually and understand what's going on in everybody's lives. It's a put work behind, but really get to know what's going on. So when we have issues come up at work, we understand why people might react the way that they're.
Okay, let me rephrase. What are you doing as a leader to reduce your burnout and your stress and anxiety? Yes. You gotta be doing something, because there's no way that you can take on all of that and not do anything. You what?
I buy a lot of chocolate.
Well, I mean, that's one way. Yes?
So, my main team, we all work, I call it the dungeon. It's the basement level of a building, there's no access to sunlight at all. And so one day I couldn't do it anymore, I needed some sun. So I purposely took the day off to work from home so I could have access to sunlight. And I made that very known to the team into that. And I gave them the opportunity to do that as long as they communicated with their, counterparts. Like, it was okay to kind of work from home so that they get that sunlight.
That's good. Do you think it's a sign of weakness? Okay. Yes.
I kind of established this before like COVID, so I would make sure Friday I work half days, and also I had the other thought of what I did during COVID. I make sure I'm not on my computer all the time. I take the breaks, I walk outside and everything. Because I know sometimes people are like, oh, I need to get this done. And I'm like, I need to take a step back and then come back with a fresh head. So that's how I do the breaks, and Fridays I barely work. So
That's good. Anyone else? Yes.
I'm starting to say no. I'm still going through
The power of no.
And as a complete sentence, right? And what I'm starting to do is I'm a person who likes to take on a lot of things. I'm thinking, okay, I'm doing a lot, but I'm really burning myself out. So I have a couple people on my team who, if we're not there, are able to handle priorities. So I'm leaning on them more and giving them more opportunities to develop them. And I need you to do this. And
Love that.
let it go.
Love that. Power of delegation and trust in your team. Yes.
I look at my calendar and see what's actually supposed to be a meeting or a phone call. I will take Zooms and go on a walk, and like if that bothers people, I don't really care. I like have my gym time blocked off, and I like to, like we're all human, so like if you need your camera off, there's just things that like I just try not to stress about for myself and set that tone for other people to not stress about it to me because I truly don't care.
Okay. I love it.
And then as an organization, it was interesting to also see our branch leadership actually they're talking about rolling out a kind of a policy of no work meetings during lunch from like noon to 1, and to try to reserve that time for things like attending like employee resource groups, you know, eating actual lunch, right? Or you know, getting lunch with people, and so.
That's a game changer. I like that. Before COVID, I would eat and walk in the hallways during lunch because I had so many meetings. And 3 years later, when I quit the job that I was at, I was sick for 6 weeks. Didn't know I was burnt out or stressed out, but my body gave out on me once I quit. I guess it was like, thank you. And it just quit on me. So that's just something to be aware of. But what they're doing with that, I think that's transformative. All right, so leading forward means becoming technology savvy, especially as we're becoming more remote and virtual. No more excuses, having different beams up there and that's not really you, right? We need to make sure that we really know how to use the technology. Becoming comfortable discussing social complex issues. Be comfortable discussing that, right? We just saw what happened in Buffalo. I'm pretty sure it impacted a lot of people when they're coming into the work now. And as a leader, be comfortable enough. And sometimes people just need to talk. They don't even need you to answer, to just be a listening ear. And that's how we lead forward, because that's a new paradigm. I've had a leader before this say, this is making me uncomfortable, can you go talk to HR? Right? Because it was uncomfortable, they weren't ready. Now I'm pretty sure that has changed now, but this is how we lead forward. And then also make sure that we understand and have a definite set of values. One of the things that came out of when, with the George Floyd and the whole incident in terms of D&I was, I remember telling our leaders that what we do today is going to impact who comes and work for us tomorrow. Because if we sit here and say nothing, in those interviews, when we begin to get people, they're going to ask, what did you do? How did your company change? And if we remain neutral and not say anything, we're not going to attract the people who has values, right? So that's the biggest thing, is leading forward, is what are your value system? What are the values? Are you working for companies, or are you the person that's putting on values that may not be alignment with where your team is? So it's something to think about, is what is your set of values that you have for yourself? Empathy is the new currency. Again, just being able to understand the needs of others and being aware of their feelings, and using active listening to gain perspective and compassion. One of the biggest things that we started doing was, I used to hold office hours, and normally when I would hold office hours, it was discuss performance. I began to hold office hours to discuss well-being. Just taking 30 minutes with my team members and just asking them how they are as a person, to ensure that they themselves was in the right space, and that they know that they're not going alone doing this. Being able to assert authority and be confident during times of uncertainty. One of the biggest things is, listen, you're a leader, be comfortable enough to make a decision, right? Because by not making a decision, you're making a decision. And it's okay if it changes, but don't sit there and do nothing when your organization or your team members need you. I had a guy, I'll never forget this, he was afraid to fire someone, so he asked me to do it. Guy didn't work for me, but he was avoiding his responsibility and his authority. You're in that role, use it for the betterment of the people, but don't forget, you have those responsibilities, and don't be afraid to use it when it is required. And then also too, being purposeful with the employees' well-being, which is, again, understanding workplace flexibility. Some places now are offering free online counseling sessions. And then also too, what has emerged is that now they're training leaders now what it means to be empathetic leadership, what that means. Has anyone had that training yet? Any companies doing that? All right, so that's what the word on the street is. Okay, so when I talked about, now as a leader, there are a lot of things that you now have to incorporate in your overall decision-making process. social complex issues. So if someone is coming, and I just want to know, like if someone is coming to you, like what happened in Buffalo, and if someone needs to come and just talk to you, how comfortable, on a scale of 1 to 10, are you with talking to people? 5? 6? 10 is the highest you're comfortable. 1 is you're not. 5, you're comfortable? 6? Is anyone below 5? Wow. And it's okay if you're not. This is a judge-free environment. I know Laura has told you guys that. This is not a place for judgment, it's just a place to be aware. Council culture, you now have to be aware of that. I had someone fire a guy because he used their brand color in his logo. She's 31. She was like, listen, I just canceled him out. I can get someone else. So that's something else that's coming into the place is the council culture, is having just a zero tolerance and not really, just don't have a lot of time or energy in it. So that's something else that you need to just be aware of as a leader, is understanding when we talk about it, it's not just about Kanye or Dave Chappelle. Those are social environments, social things that are happening that comes into the workplace. And you need to be aware of that. Of course, mental health, the well-being, working conditions, flexibility, and then just overall cultural awareness. All right, so example of well-being. First and foremost, employees, managers, and supervisors all need to feel like they're continuously developing in their work and overall lives. As work and life now being more blended than ever, it is critical that organizations address and manage employee engagement along with the 5 elements of well-being. This is an article from Gallup. They did a survey and they said this is the overall 5 elements of well-being from an employee engagement standpoint: career, social, financial, physical, and community. By having this, they're saying it reduces the odds of burnout, stress, worry, anxiety, and depression. And I guess for people who are team leaders and frontline managers, what are some ways that you have had meaningful conversations with employees about any of the 5 elements of well-being? Anyone want to volunteer?
I have a person who's in some capacities we're peers, and in others she works for me, and has been really struggling with some ongoing health issues. And I've had to have sort of repeated conversations with her about, you need to take time. You need to take short-term disability. You need to take, and she keeps coming back with, well, I have all these responsibilities. It's like, well, handle it. We need you to be part of, to be there and to come back, when you're ready, versus trying to, do these sort of incremental things which are ultimately causing you harm. But it's been hard, and it's a hard thing to be in that position where you don't want to be condescending, but at the same time you want to support that desire to take care of yourself.
Yes. So, rule number 1 as a leader of people, it's your responsibility to give them the information. It's their responsibility to choose. And you have to be okay if they don't choose. Okay? You can't force someone to want to make themselves better. But you're doing everything you need to do, and it's up to them to choose. Had a person that worked for me, she was complaining, working all these extra hours. We brought her in help, and she didn't take it. Unfortunately, she ended up in the hospital for 8 weeks. So again, it's our responsibility to give them the information. It's their responsibility to choose. Okay, so these are some, they had 24 CEOs got together, and they were talking about, transformational leadership and what does it mean during this time. And I just want to read the one from Northrop Grumman, Kathy Wharton. She said, we are really focused on thinking through the impacts on equity of the programs that we have around choice, making sure that an employee who chooses to work remotely 5 years from now doesn't find themselves limited in their career options or less networked or connected than other employees, because it could be a backward progression on the diversity of our workforce. That is so true, right? So whatever benchmark we're making today, we don't want that to impact anyone in the future. And one of the things that we did in 2020 was, if anyone decided to work remotely, we were not going to use that against them in their performance. That was a staple. And if that is not the staple in your organization or if you are trying to figure out how to work with all that, get with your leader, and have a conversation about it. But that's the biggest thing. We don't want to stifle anyone's progression in terms of career options. All right, so scenario one, and all I have is one scenario. Okay, so Kathy is a manager of people and team lead for this project. So I want you guys to get into teams that you're already in. She has been coming into the office every morning around 6 a.m. for the last 2 weeks to get ready for a major meeting with her clients. Corey, who is a major contributor on the team, calls Kathy and asks her if he can work from home because his wife has to leave and go out of state and he must take care of their kids while she's gone for a week. Kathy is stressed out and begins to panic. She insists that he finds childcare and strongly suggests he comes into work and get ready for the meeting because she does not think he'll be able to focus at home. All right, so, and this is a true scenario. So, get in your groups and please answer these questions like, what is the issue? How would you resolve it? And all of that. And then I'll just pick out 2 of who wants to volunteer. All right, and you have, how long can they have, Lori?
That's up to you.
How long does it typically take to work in groups? 2 minutes?
I'm worried about your time.
3, okay, 3 minutes.
Why don't you give each of them a question?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, question 1, question 2, question 3, question 4, question 5.
That's good.